We've just gone through, you all should get a prompt that it's recording. We've just gone through all the different kinds of meetings, and now we'll just go through quickly and talk about quorum, which is another component of OPMA, so that you know that meeting is a term that is particular to school board work. So a quorum, a meeting, right, under OPMA is any time that there is a quorum present. So this is going to be, three of five if you're a five-person board, or four of seven if you're Seattle and a seven-person board. It's anywhere and anytime. So this means that you are strategic as a board and as a governance team with your district support to make sure that you're not at a quorum in events, right? Because you could potentially talk and make a decision, but you haven't um, you haven't publicized that you're there, you haven't left space for public comment, you haven't done any of those things. So you can't gather, right, as a group of as a quorum or a full board. You can do two by twos. So that's what a lot of boards do is that two, if a lot of you want to go to the spring concert, right? Two will go on one session, two will go the other. There's strategies used that different boards kind of figure out to make sure that you are obeying by this quorum dictated by OPMA. A social media post with multiple comments can also emerge as a quorum, particularly if you're talking about school board business, right, or district business. Somebody posts something, then somebody says something else, then somebody says something else, and suddenly there's three of you in conversation about something that you could act on that would have implications, right, for the district. So you just really want to be mindful of any sort of posting or online presence so that you're not accidentally creating quorum and violating OPMA. And then the same goes with emails. So some districts, some school boards do BCC, right, where the board, where the chair or the superintendent will do a BCC so that you all can't respond, and that's just for information sharing. But you don't ever want to reply all because there becomes an email thread where you all are talking about something over email that could pertain to district business, which could mean decisions could be made, but the public is not aware of this and it hasn't been posted. So you can see how it can get away from you, right? When three or more of you are in conversation in any platform. So that is something to be mindful of. Patty, before we move on, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, just to clarify, you can gather. That's totally fine. You can't do any business or quote action of the board. And action of the board is considered discussions. But yes, the five of you can ride down in the van to the WSSDA regional meeting as long as you talk about the skiing last weekend and nothing else. You can go to the football game together. You just can't talk about the football coach's contract. So it's okay to do, your kid graduates and you throw a party for him. You can invite your board members over, but you darn tootin' shouldn't be talking about any school district business.
Mhm.
And the big thing is just remember perceptions. Perceptions might not be true, but they go a long way. So be aware of how you're perceived when you're out like that.
And that's why, depending upon the community and how the relationship is with the community and the board, some boards have decided to be strategic around how they do that. But yeah, Patty, thanks for clarifying. And WASDA conference, that's why so many people love going because they get to hang out with their board in a way that they don't always get to, right? Because you're not talking about business, you're learning. Wonderful. We're going to move it along to parliamentary law and procedure. Thanks, Patty. And just let me know when to click, okay?
Great, thanks. So if you see my eyes elsewhere, I'm not watching the Olympics. I've got notes up here just so I don't forget anything. But I just want to, what do we mean when we say parliamentary procedures? And essentially, it's Robert's Rules of Order, basically. And this all started back with the English Parliament back in the days because they needed rules by which to operate, and all large governing bodies have their own set of parliamentary rules by which they operate by. General Congress of the UN, Congress, Parliament, all of those do. However, that's not feasible for all small bodies, whether it's your city council, your school board, or the church finance committee, or the soccer club. And so back in 1876, this guy named Henry, guesses on the last name, like Henry Roberts, came up with these Roberts Rules of Order, and look at the legacy now, 150 years later. So that is the kind of what they are. And then the purpose of them. And side note, this is a slide heavy presentation. I'm not going to read everything because it's going to be used as a resource for you. So that's why there's more than what I'm saying. But what the purpose of parliamentary procedures in a nutshell is just to be fair to all the participants and make sure everyone has equal rights and participation and voice. Real simple. So next one there, Heather. How do you attain that purpose? With these different principles? And that's everybody has equal rights. Everybody has a right to discussion. Everybody has a right to information. The majority decision carries it out while the minority rights are preserved. So basically, it's a way to transact business while protecting the rights of the members and preserving the spirit of harmony. So it can be daunting, but don't let it. When you look at this 1,500-page book on Robert's Rules, don't worry about that. It's a way to be fair that everybody has the same information and there's some order to the chaos of the meeting. So that's basically it. So you can go ahead there and next one. So Robert's Rules, I think this is the most critical thing that we all do as board members is making a motion. And there's 6 basic steps. Some people might consider there's a step 0 where sometimes the chair will call for a motion, but they don't need to call for a motion because I could just say, I want to make a motion. And once I'm recognized, I can make a motion. So really, there's a motion made. The chair restates the motion. There's a second made. You have discussion, debate on it. You vote, and then the results are announced. So we're going to work through those steps here, and I'll go through. So first of all, you need to gain the floor by being recognized from the chair. You can't just shout it out. And that's, again, kind of the purpose of parliamentary procedures, how to keep chaos out of the meeting and have an orderly meeting. And the second part about stating the motion precisely is, if you take away one thing today, this is what I want you to take away. So moved is not a motion. It's got to be stated precisely. So Carson wants to move the graduation date from Thursday to Friday because there's tornadoes in the forecast. And she puts a motion up to say, I move that we move graduation to Friday because of the weather forecast. Move it where? Like to the neighboring district? What time? Is it 8 o'clock in the morning? Is it 9 o'clock at night? You need to be precise on this. And so that goes along with policies. Yeah, I move that we pass the policy on health ed curriculum. What policy? What's the number of it? Has it been amended? Has it been changed? Be precise on this. The second does not need to be fully stated. You can just say, I second the motion. That's fine. We'll get into this in a little bit. You don't technically need a section words, but I'm going to cover that a little bit later. And then this is the important part. The chair repeats the motion precisely. And at that point, the board owns the motion. So the Carson made the motion, and at that point, that was Carson's motion, and it didn't really matter. But once the chair restates it and says the motion on the floor is, boom, I need a second, at that point, it's owned by the board. Why that's important is because if there's any changes to the motion after that, since it's owned by the board has to decide if those changes are allowed, meaning they'd have to vote on them, yay or nay, or add amendments. So it's very important when the chair restates your motion that they restate it as you intended. And if they made a mistake, just a little comma or a pause, or they didn't state it precisely, correct them because you want to make sure it is precise. Once it's stated, it's owned by the board, and then it's open for debate and discussion. And this is another thing that don't get hung up on this. Some people say you can't have debate until after the motion's been made. Well, think about it. I like to suggest that prior to the motion being made, you need to have information. You need to gather information because how can you make a motion if you don't have the information? But you really shouldn't debate or discuss the merits of the motion until after the motion's been made because you don't know what you're discussing until you heard the motion. But the point is, I've seen a lot of boards try to shut things down by saying there's no motion, we can't discuss. That's not the best way to go about it. Go ahead and ask clarifying questions, get the information, make the motion, and then you can have the debate. Okay, I think that's pretty good there. So the rules of the debate, and I'm putting rules in quotations because we're small boards and technically these rules don't apply. However, just like any law, following the intent is a good thing. You might not need to alternate views when one person pro and one person con, but make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. If you heard one of your board members didn't say a thing, the chair should probably be saying, Cynthia, do you want to add to this? Make sure everybody gets a turn. The discussion is technically supposed to be started by the motion maker. It doesn't need to, but it's often helpful because they can cite precisely what they intended by the motion and why they made it and start the conversation off. The I move the previous question closes the debate and goes to a vote, and we're going to cover that a little bit later. But again, it's not I don't always recommend that for small boards. And the speaker needs to be recognized. And this really depends on your board. I mean, our board was pretty lax and casual, and you'd see the board chair just go like, yeah, Patty, like go ahead, and you can go ahead and talk. Where some boards are more formal and say, Director Wood, would you like to add you're next in line? So it really kind of depends. But with a group of five, this is how team dynamics work, and you can kind of see. You can see, I've been on boards where they've turned a name card up so that the chair knows they want to speak and they write it down and then they're next in line. But generally, with five of you, you can kind of do a nod or a wink and get in line to speak. So I think, I don't know if you want any questions or before I go on to amendments.
And I don't see anything in the chat. Any questions from folks on at this point? All right.
Okay, so next up is amendments, and I don't want to get too hung up on this. We don't use them a lot, but we get a lot of questions on it. So basically, what I really want to recommend is only use amendments when you're trying to make clerical corrections. If your intent is to change the intent or the purpose of the motion, it just gets cumbersome and messy. Vote the motion down and start anew. But for example, when Carson said that she wanted to move the graduation date to Friday, and you want to clarify that's Friday, the 16th of June, that would be a fine amendment. Not the fact that you then want to move it to the neighboring auditorium in the neighboring district. That changes the whole intent of the motion. So try not to go down that. Just like a motion, the wording needs to be exact and precise. Also, it can be as simple as a word or a comma, or it can be an entire paragraph. And we did that a lot in boards. And that, like I said, you don't want to change the intent, that gets messy, but if you're adding clarification or adding information, that can be worked on too. Yes, you can amend amendments. I totally don't do that anyway. And amendments must be germane. So when you're voting on whether you're going to change graduation to Friday, don't say, "Oh, by the way, I want all the kids to wear hats too." Like that's like no, that's not germane. But I think the big thing I want to get on, when you make an amendment and you vote on the amendment, you're voting on the amendment, not the emotion. So you're basically voting on a hypothetical that hasn't taken place yet. You're voting on to do something specific to something that you haven't voted on. So I kind of think of it as this way. All of you, I don't know if many of you have kids. Time to go to soccer practice, get in the car. Everybody's trying to get out of the car. And the motion is get people in the car. But then guess what? Katie wants to bring a couple toys. And so now the whole amendment is what toy are you going to bring? And can you bring one or two? So while the motion is to get in the car, the amendment and what has to be happened first is address which stuffy is coming with us to soccer practice. That's the amendment. That has to be voted on first. Once that's settled, then we can go to the main motion of getting in the car. So it's kind of like doing things in reverse order. And it's pretty easy to get confused sometimes. And so it's very important for the chair to state precisely what they're doing. Say the amendment passes, and so the vote is to move graduation to Friday the 15th. When you read the original motion, then the original motion is now considered, even though it's not the amended motion. So they'll say as amended, and now you're voting. So you voted on the amendment, and then you vote on the motion.
And I have a quick question, Patty. If you get lost in the amendment land here, you can always do a point of clarification, can't you?
Yeah, and that's easy to do with the board of five. Yeah. So it is pretty clear. And it's actually really important because you have an audience and you have other people in the room. So don't ever hesitate to ask for clarification because if you're even slightly confused, think about the poor folks out in the audience. They might be lost in Never Never Land. So go ahead and ask for clarification. That's a good thing to do. Also helps for the person taking notes for the meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we've got one more slide on amendments. Okay. Yes, what I wanted to say was there's no such thing as a friendly. I mentioned that a little bit early. Once the amendment's stated by the chair, that is owned by the board, so you can't change the motion without a vote. Now, let's say Carson had said, I want to vote, I want to move the graduation date to Friday. And before the chair says anything, I say, hey, why don't we clarify and say we want to move it to Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning? And it hasn't been stated by the chair at that point, Carson could say, yeah, good idea. Let's move it to this point. That might be what people think of when they say a friendly, but the point is you can't do it once the chair states it, because at that point it's owned by the board and the board is an entire entity that needs to make any changes to it. So, and then as you said, you vote on the amendment first, and then you vote on the amended motion. So I think, yeah, okay. So there's a few other common Roberts rules that get used in boards. One is call the question, which ends debate and calls and pulls it to a vote. Again, you can do that, but what I've seen is people use it as a tool because they're frustrated. They want to end the conversation and they use it to control the dialogue. And that's really not the best way to do it. A, you have to vote on it. So now you have to vote on this before you can vote on what you want to vote on. But in a small board, if you feel like the discussion and dialogue's going in circles and you're ready, just say, I'm thinking we could vote on this. Can we make a motion or the motion's been made, excuse me, but can we go ahead and call for the vote now? You don't have to like make it in formal motion to do so. Look at the chair and you guys can read each other. So, but if you do officially say, after you've been recognized, I call for the question, you need to vote on that before then you vote on the motion. Secondly, the tabling the motion postpones it, and that really shouldn't be used. It's intended to be used only if you're missing information. So you can't, if you guys can't decide, you don't know what it is, don't table it indefinitely. You vote it down and come back when you have what you need. Tabling a motion, say you're voting on the new high school property you're going to buy, and you just got notice from the insurance company it's in the flood zone. Going to table that until you can get more information from the insurance company on what the liability are of building in a flood zone. And you would table it too, and you put the specific date in.
Hmm.
Now, point of order is the one thing you can do that doesn't take a vote, and that is only to clarify the rules. So, say that we've been debating moving the graduation date, and we've got an amendment on it to move it to Friday at 9 a.m. And then the chair, we've decided that that sounds good. So the chair goes, the motion on the floor is to, and he reads the original motion. So, excuse me, we've passed it to say we're going to vote it on 9 a.m. on Friday. But then when the chair reads it, he reads the original motion and doesn't say 9 a.m. That's where you could say, point of order, we need to read the amended motion, not the motion. You can use this if you don't think rules are being followed or if you think somebody hasn't had a fair chance to speak. So that's the one time that you don't need to vote on it, but you should be recognized. Now, abstentions are a little bit sticky, and they're a bit more sticky with small boards. And the reason why I say they're sticky is because you can't require somebody to abstain, but legally that person could get in trouble if they don't abstain and they're under a conflict of interest. So you cannot require a board member to abstain, nor can you require them to state the reason why they're abstaining. That's not the best practice. So if a board member should abstain, say their spouses in that school or the spouses on the teacher's contract or they're voting to send the band to Hawaii and your kid's the band director or something like that, you might want to abstain and say why. If you benefit from something personally, like giving the teachers a huge raise and your spouse is the teacher and the sole income person in the House. You would benefit from that. You should abstain. If you don't and you still vote, you could be held culpable legally because that's a violation of the Code of Ethics. If a member abstains, it's a non-vote, and so now the quorum is four. If you have four people and you have two yeses and two nos, it fails because you need a majority to win. So, considering that, what's the minimum number of votes necessary to pass a motion on a school board with five people? Minimum number of yes votes.
We have three from Renee in the chat.
I know. Renee, I'm sorry. It's a trick question. It is actually two because you could have two members abstain. We've had this happen before. You could have two members abstain, so you still have a quorum of three. And if you have three people, then it only takes two people. So that said, this has been a problem with smaller districts, which is not hugely uncommon because when a small district, it seems like a lot of people have family members who work in the district and there can be a conflict with contracts. So it can be a problem. The bigger thing is if you have three people there, not because of abstentions, but because two are on vacation, not the right time to be voting on the superintendent's contract. So if you do, things happen. We've had board members with three or four people do standard business. I highly recommend you don't vote on that day to fire the superintendent. We actually had a neighboring city council, I think Susan might know about this, that tried to pull that move and it didn't end well. So don't try to game the system by passing votes when you have board members absent.
And I just want to note that Renee, you're doing great. Thank you. And I put in two different resources that are adjacent to what Patty's talking about. One is avoiding conflicts of interest. So that's a PDF that was a publication out of our policy and legal team, and also the parliamentary procedures booklet that started this. So just FYI.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Renee. I wasn't really trying to trick you, but
You're doing great.
okay, I think we could go ahead and go on since we're
Okay.
running out of time here. Okay, small boards, mentioned that real briefly. Generally, any board under 12 is a small board. And so in essence, the rules, technically, we don't have to abide by all the rules. Like you don't have to stand to be recognized before you speak. You don't need a second. Members not restricted to only speaking twice during debate. But that's kind of how you operate as a board. And the intent is don't get hung up on the rules. And I always like to tell people, if you can't get a second on a motion and the motion maker goes, well, I don't need a second, I want to vote on it. Fine, just go vote on it and put it to bed because as soon as you vote on it, then it's down and only if only one person wants it, you vote on the issue, you put it to bed and you move along. And then you don't raise it again. So just because you don't have a second doesn't mean that you should or can't vote on it. Oh, and then my other one is the chair can, and this is my personal opinion. I feel strongly about it. They can participate in the debate, and I think they should vote. I know a lot of school boards in Washington, the chair doesn't vote. They only vote in a chance of a tiebreaker. And my personal opinion on that is everybody was elected equally. All of your votes are the same. The five of you are equal votes. The chair should participate. That's what they're elected to do. And then also, if there is a tiebreaker, it makes their vote count more than the others, and that's not the case. So go ahead and have your chair vote. But like I said, many districts don't do that.
Hmm. And that sort of practice is determined at the local level, right? The
Yep.
board kind of
Yep.
decides how they govern. Mhm.
Yep. Totally up to the local board. That's why it's local control.
That's right.
Okay, quorums. I think we talked a little bit on this earlier. I guess one thing I want to say is you can hold a meeting without a quorum and you cannot take action. And it sounds funny, like who would do that if you only people? But actually, you see it sometimes in the baseball season's on and the game's starting next door, and a couple people want to run out and catch the game, and it's at the end of the meeting. And I've said, don't end the meeting if you've got good of the order left or one more presentation. You can't take action, but if somebody has to leave to catch a plane or somebody's sick or somebody's having a baby, it's okay. You just don't do anything important, but it's okay to close off the meeting normally. Wouldn't make sense to start a meeting without quorum, but sometimes you lose quorum during the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I think.
You have about, I don't know, 6 minutes or so to
Okay,
stop
so
some time.
this one I'm gonna jump ahead really quickly. The big thing on this is agenda setting. Who sets the agenda on that? And basically the board chair works with the superintendent. Honestly, we all know that the superintendent brings the draft agenda there and then the board chair approves it. What I want to talk about this is that anybody has a right, any board member, not anybody, any board member has a right to request something be put on the agenda. And I'm careful with how I say this because while you have a right to have things on the agenda, the board has a right to approve the agenda. And if you're the only one who wants something on the agenda, the board can vote it down. So I'm being careful about how I say that. There's a lot of ways you can speak your voice. You should never be muted. You should always have a voice. And there's other ways to do it. But you can do it during good of the order. You can do it by submitting a letter to the board. You can do it as a public citizen. I think the big point on this, though, is that generally speaking, boards are pretty receptive to having anybody put something on the agenda if it's at the appropriate time. And what you need to understand is there's a real strategy and the agendas are full and there's a calendar to follow. So ask to have something put on the agenda and don't expect to have it put on at the next meeting necessarily. So you want to look at how the new WIA policies are impacting the students in your school. Request to have that put on and let the chair and the superintendent look at the calendar and say, you know, we've got time in May. Can you wait that long before we discuss it? So there's a little give and take, and if it's important, it will happen, and you can do that. So this is where working as a team is important. You work as a team together to get it on, and being patient and understanding of the complexity of a calendar that is year-round, that is set by the staff. It takes a lot to do. The amount of work and time that goes into board meetings and agenda creating is big, and expecting the staff and the superintendent to switch on a dime and change it at the last minute. Be cooperative teammate is all.
Yeah,
So
and you're starting at the mid-year, right? So there's already been a whole annual calendar created, right? So you're entering into the kind of middle stream of work going on.
yeah. So okay, order of business. Let's go ahead and pass that one on because we're running out of time. Okay, just as we said earlier, it must be posted 24 hours and action can only be taken at regular posted meetings. I guess a big thing is you can change your agenda and you can vote on things that aren't on the agenda only at a regular meeting. So, and we did this all the time. You know, there's a last minute PO order for pizza for the high school jazz club. Okay, fine, add it onto the agenda and vote for it. Again, just like having not full board, not a good time to change the agenda and fire the superintendent. Don't do that. And also, you cannot vote on things that aren't on the agenda at special meetings or work sessions. They can only happen at your regular posted meeting. And you all have a policy that states when and where your regular posted meeting is. And that's why you're allowed to change that agenda, but not at any other meetings.
Mhm.
So be careful with that one, but it's very commonplace, especially on items in the consent agenda. You're always adding and pulling things out of there, and that's fine. But changing the school mascot's name, not cool. So.
And I would just add to staying focused on the agenda is really important too, so that the timing, you're respecting kind of everyone's time and focus and the intention of of what you're doing, the business that you're working on.
And I guess this is my biggest thing, I think. Your agenda is your one tool. It is your board meeting is your one tool to do what you're elected to do. It's how you tell the public what you're doing, what you're working on, what you're focused on. It's how you prioritize your student achievement and what your accomplishments are. That agenda has been crafted to support that, and crafting your agenda to support your strategic plan, to support your mission, to support your vision. That's a big deal. And so staying focused and staying on the agenda, that's how you're carrying out your responsibilities and what you're elected for. So it's a it's a big deal. Okay, run out of time, but on this one, real quick, individual director roles, it's also your responsibility to speak up and ask. And so don't get engaged. I'm not talking to be argumentative, and don't say something just because you haven't said anything or because you need to hear yourself talk. But it is your responsibility to ask questions, clarifying information. Don't come to the board meeting 5 minutes early and open the board pack to review it. I mean, this is something we need to be prepared for. It's also being careful to have discussion and not having conversations, but discussion. And once you vote, you're supporting the majority's decision. But you do have there's five of you, and you can't do anything as an individual, but your individual role is super important. You're incredibly valuable, and your participation, your knowledge, your awareness, your gathering of information, and your voice are critical. So step up and own that and be proud of it. So. Okay, I think the last one was we've all know this about watching your body language. And the one thing I want to point out is it's not always about eye rolling or stuff like that. We get that, like watch your body language. But something that we often do, really want to make sure the audience knows I'm listening to them. I'll lean in and I'm looking at them and I'm nodding. And you know what they just saw? They just saw that I agreed with them, and therefore I am going to be supporting their demand. So remember to be aware of how your body language works, both pro and con. I know when I was on the state board, I want to make sure I take notes all the time. I'm taking notes. But when people in the audience were talking, I stopped taking notes because I want to make sure they know I'm paying attention. So be aware of that. And that goes with your board members too. If you're ticked, it happens at a board member and you don't like what they're saying, that's not the time for you to start looking through the board book. Show respect and pay attention and don't get distracted.
Mm. Uh-oh.
Was garner a clear, not unanimous consent and give clear directives to your superintendent. After a 25-minute discussion, oops, your superintendent might not be totally clear on what you're asking them to do. Restate after a discussion to very clear, because if you just had a 25-minute discussion and everybody's had all these ideas and they've been trying to take notes and they're like, okay, yeah, what again now? So make sure you give clear directives to your superintendent. And
Is it usually the board president who does
usually
that,
the
or can,
board chair, yeah, but as a board member, if your board chair isn't doing that, as a board member, you can say, can you clarify and summarize, sir or ma'am, what we just did so I understand?
yeah, and that's going to help the audience too.
Yep. Okay, and I'll stop there.
Patty, it was excellent. Thank you. If anyone, I hope you know this, you should add any questions you have in the chat. We have 5 minutes that I'll just offer some closure, but we can also spend that 5 minutes answering any questions you have around OPMA or Robert's rules, or agenda setting or minute, anything. So if you
And
want,
Heather, I don't know, I think they have my email address, but they're free to reach out. I can put it here too, that if
that's
they have
great.
questions and want to follow up, I'm just give me an email and I can
That's
I'm
wonderful,
happy to
Patty.
answer. Yeah.
Thank you. And Natalie, this was great. Is the presentation available to access? Yes, it is. We'll put it right on the New Director Network webpage, which I'll share in a second. And we'll also have a link to it in our next newsletter in March. The recording here, where Patty brought it all to life, will also be available for folks who missed coming, but still need the information or would benefit from your questions and the info that Patty shared. So let me just share that in mind. Hold on, let me get this and get some of these resources. So one is that if you aren't getting the newsletter, and that comes out at the beginning of every month. And this last one in February, Patty wrote about her role as a board member and what she'd learned. And we also have some resources for today's session so that it's helpful to kind of see the one in advance. February's is just right here. I'm putting these resources right in the chat for you. Okay. So you can read what those are like. So look for our next newsletter on March 2nd. And then in March, on March 19th, we'll have Mary Furtakis, a close friend actually and colleague of Patty's. As I understand it, you two vacation together in the woods. So I love
Yeah.
that for you both.
We,
um,
we've agreed to bail each other out if we ever get in trouble.
It's excellent. So the two of them, so Mary will be joining us next month to talk about vision, mission, and goals, and in particular, strategic planning. And Mary and I have been working together to develop a strategic planning offering from WSDA. So we have some resources to share. There's also a new article in Direct. So Direct is a publication of WSDA, and it's all about, Mary was highlighted and quoted all about strategic planning and the thinking and work she's done in that area. So join us in March for that. It should be useful. That'll get us started directly on that key responsibility of the board, which is mission, vision, and goals. And then the last thing is just keep in touch. If you have any questions, it's 1 o'clock. So I'll stay after. And Patty, maybe if you could too, if there's any direct questions. And thank you, everyone. Looks like it didn't work, the constant contact page. Thank you for letting me know, Carson. We'll get going on that. I'm glad that the newsletter worked though. So we look forward to seeing you next month. And if there's any individual questions, here we are to answer.